Welcome to episode 13 of the Light Her Project podcast, Real Women.
Real talk.
I'm Rachel Strella.
And I'm Vixen Divine.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today's topic is how to maintain a positive outlook during challenging times. And we are experiencing a lot of challenges right now. We have a worsening economy, we have inflation, we have wars, worker shortages, rising healthcare costs, and not to mention all of the other things that happen in life that affect us personally on a personal level. So, we normally start with our personal experiences. So, Vixen suggested this topic today, and I'd love to hear from you. Can you share with us what you're experiencing and why you felt we should address it today?
Well, I felt like the reason I brought this topic up is because in my practice, not only do I provide the physical change, but my clients also understand and strive to really give me what's on their mind. So while I'm giving that physical change, I hear a lot. And I've been hearing a lot of stress and anxiety around the war, around just things that are changing, economy, how much money, all these types of things. And I've been hearing that coming, and not just from like one person. I'm hearing that repeatedly lately. So since it's happening in my practice, I'm thinking that maybe it is stretching across because these things are really happening. It's not just to one age group or to one economic or, these things are really happening. So I'm thinking that maybe it is something that needs to be addressed across the board.
Wow, you know what? You're right. You're kind of like a therapist.
I know you get that bonus for free, right?
I mean, I know when I hop on the table, I'm like, well, time to tell Vixen everything that's going on in my life. Yep. No, you're right. Okay, well, we got some questions. So, well, we'll talk about the economy specifically. Let's go back to the old days. And what was it like when we were younger? So, one question is, what was the minimum wage when we got our first job? I know I started working in 10th grade, and that would have been around 1997. So I was right at the end of the minimum wage that was $4.25 an hour.
Wow, wow, yeah. I think I was in high school when I got my first, probably 10th or 11th grade, I'd say. But that would have been like 80, like 86, like 1980, somewhere around there. And so in that, it was just low.
Yeah.
It was just low. It was like $3 and like 50 cents,
Yeah.
not a whole lot, but nobody really cared because I worked at a clothing store. So I got the clothing store discount. So you really never brought home any money anyway, because you put stuff back behind the rack knowing you were going to get paid. It never left the store.
Oh. Hey, that worked then. I worked at a grocery store. So talk about inflation. Wow. Um, it just blows my mind how much it costs to get groceries right now.
Oh, yeah. That's why Aldi's, I don't know if you know this, Aldi's is basically the number one grocery store right now
Right.
in the US. Like they are booming like nobody's business.
I believe it. I believe it. All right. So another question was, what was the cost to buy a house the year you were born? Um, so for me, I was born in 1981, and the average cost to buy a house was about $68,900, according to my research. Because obviously, I wasn't buying a house in 1981. Um, which actually isn't too far off. I mean, my parents bought their first house about 5 years later, and I believe they paid around 70 for it. So it wasn't like it was too off from where I was.
Gotcha. My parents paid very little for their house. I was born in the 70s, and yet I have two older siblings. Um, and so I remember it was a choice of the house that we had, which was not a single home. It was I think they call a duplex, a twin. Like and it was brick. So it was that, or like right down the street was a mansion almost. It had several rooms and a whole driveway. The only reason they didn't get the mansion is because they thought that my two siblings were going to be the only two, and then there were two more. So this is how cheap it was. Are you ready? In my era, around to buy a house around my era was like around $25,000
Wow.
for an average home, for an average
Oh
home.
my goodness. Wow. I mean, I know this is a problem. My brother and his fiance, they're actually closing on their first house together next week. And they went through so much with this. Like they were going to several. I mean, I can't even remember how many, but they went to so many houses, and they put an offer in on five or six. It couldn't get. They kept putting more money down, more money, just to get a house. And what they ended up with, it's still outrageous when I think about where we were, and where we were
Hmm.
even years ago. It's just so much money. Even and the interest rates are really high now as well. When I
Yep.
at my house, it was around 3%. Now they're in 7.5, 8%.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yet the
Yeah.
economy is not getting any better.
No, it's kind of scary. No. And so while we're talking about that, I pulled my audience on what keeps them awake at night. What are the constant worries for them? So here were some of the responses that I received. Not knowing when I'm going to be able to get out of my parents' house because of how expensive it is to rent or buy. And
Hmm.
that's correct because it's not just buying, it's renting too. Everything is really expensive for housing. Another one was climate change. And another one was the safety of her children. War, school shootings, terrorists, providing for them financially. All of these things were worries. So let's talk about that a little bit. What do you think?
I'm thinking a lot of this, the worries now extend from financial situations. Um, because if you think about it, when you talk about not being able to move out, that's a financial situation, right? Um, Climate change. If you had enough money, would not all these people be buying like electric cars? And so, because even though like it saves on gas, the price is so much higher. They do that on purpose, I swear. The price is so much higher. And then the safety of your kids. Okay, if you could, a financial thing, if you could, would you take them out of that environment? Would you homeschool them even with a group of like neighborhood kids? Would you do that? But there we are. Then you'd hire a teacher, right? But then that costs what? Money, right? So it's my thought that maybe people should sit down, just take a moment. If you live with someone, if you're by yourself, you can just figure it out yourself. But if you live with someone, sit down, figure out what do you want to do, and how much more money do you need a month to do that? I have a friend who is working. He's working and he's at his wits' end, really, because he says he's working, and he's not getting anywhere. So stop doing that. So now you have to sit down, stop doing that. If that's not working for you, sit down. What are your options? And find out how you're going to make more money that's going to help you to make it to the end of the month and to do what you want to do. I know that sounds simple, but we'll talk more about it in a minute. Rachel, what do you think?
I think this is great advice. I read a book uh, earlier this year called "Who, Not How," and one of the book principles was that if you have enough money to fix a problem, you don't have a problem. And I agree with that. There are some things that money can't fix, but money can fix a lot of things. And it may not be able to fix everything in the planet. I mean, buying a car that has like an electric vehicle, that helps your carbon footprint. It might not affect the world, but I think it makes people sleep better at night knowing they're making their contribution. Oh, this is good advice. The next question is really in relation to this is like, how can people deal with anxiety and fear? And I have a feeling, Vixen, that you probably have a lot to say about that.
Well, how do they deal with it? It's really humans. We as humans understand that nothing is certain. Okay, we know that to be a logical thing. But we all have the feeling. We need to have note I said feeling of security. So we have to perceive stability financially, environmentally, and emotionally. If we perceive that to be so, our stress level goes down. We feel okay, like everything's right with the world, la 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 la. Because in our world, in our environment, in our space, things are better. So if we have that, and like we talked about earlier, I said I'd come back to it, right? So if we made that plan and we analyzed what we needed a month and we figured that out, it'll take a little while. It might take a few months to figure it out, you know. But when you figure that out, then you have that stability, that perceived stability financially, emotionally, and because you're emotionally stressed when these things are happening. But when you're done with that and you've got it together, then guess what? Your stress goes down. You feel better. You feel more secure. You feel like, so that will make actually that money, if you start there, that will bring down everything.
Mm, I agree with you because when there's something that feels like it's out of my control and it's causing stress and anxiety for me, I just have to make a plan. I just have to do something. I have to sit down and map out what this plan is. And it just mentally makes me feel better. Feel like I have a plan now. So you're right. And I think, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, Vixen, but I think there's something to be said for some self care as well. Making sure that you're taking care of yourself, you're sleeping, exercising, you're not letting the stress and anxiety get the better of your health. And I mean, you can't let it paralyze you either. I mean, I know people who they watch the news and they're freaking out. It's constant, and so it's you can't let these things paralyze you. It's not healthy. Um, and I know you told me this before, Vixen, about distracting yourself. It doesn't mean that you're going to bury your head in the sand, but if you focus too much on the stuff that's bogging you down, it leads to more bogging down.
Yes.
Yeah, and
It's what you see.
yes, exactly. Now I'm gonna go back to my Bible on life, okay, for a minute. My Zen and the Art of Happiness book. So this is interesting in this book. It talks about how modern research has shown that thinking influences our moment to moment reproduction of cells in our body. So it's a complicated process, but essentially, bear with me here. So those peptides, which are cell receptors, and they
Mm-hmm.
determine what we think and feel. Okay. So when a new cell is produced, which is often, it isn't always a clone of the old cell, but a cell that has more receptors for whatever peptide it received to cause it to split. So that means if the cell, okay, received peptides that produced emotions of depression, the new cells are created with more receptors for depression, and fewer of like the good stuff. So all new cells are created basically according to what we think and feel. So if we're depressed for an hour, we've just produced 18 billion new cells that have more receptors calling out for more depression like peptides. This sounds complicated, but it's fascinating to me. And basically screaming, send us more depression. And people can actually be addicted to depression for this reason or any type of emotion. The more you engage in any type of emotion or behavior, the greater your desire for it becomes. So it makes you think, how what did your cell receptors communicate to your body today? I can't think of a better reason to let go of fear and anxiety, or at least do your best to do that. And I struggle with it, but I don't want more peptides screaming for depression or anxiety.
Well, I think that brings us to awareness, though. Everything, honestly, everything that you need is around you. You just
Mhm.
don't see it. You
Yeah.
only see what is relevant to you at the time. Even though it's right in front of you, you just don't see it. You see it when you need it, you see it when you want to. That doesn't mean it's not there. So, the classic example of you bought a new dress. Oh, you love this dress. It's a gorgeous dress. It looks good color, looks good on you. You go to the grocery store in this dress. Now, it's an everyday dress. You go to the store in this dress, and somebody else has on the same exact dress you do. They own that dress before. You know you've seen it, but you didn't see it because you weren't aware of it. But now that you have one, everybody's got on your dress, right? So it's awareness of things that you need that are around you. You actually have solutions to your problems. You just need to know how to be ready for it when it comes to you.
Yeah. That's really great advice. And that's something we're going to touch on when we get into what we're seeing as well. Really, really good stuff. Okay. So,
Oh,
no,
one thing I have to say. I gotta say it before I lose it. Okay.
mm, let's do it.
All right. So, as far as their plan, they've got to know different types of financial plans are out there. I want to clarify. I'm not saying you have to just keep working, 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 working. It's not what I'm saying. I mean, if you try that, that may be good. But if that doesn't work for you, maybe two people go to work, but they pay childcare. Is it financially smart for one person to stay home because of the amount of childcare? Different types of financial situations. So don't just limit yourself to one because you'll lose. Okay, go ahead.
No,
I
that's
just had to get
right.
that
It actually reminds me of a speaker that I heard. It was a Visage speaker. And he was talking about when we come to problem, like how we deal with problems, we often say, what should I do? And he said to reframe it that it should be, what could I do? And it opens up a lot more possibilities that you might not have thought of. So, all right, last question. How do you live a fulfilled life despite what's happening around you? So, for example, people who stop listening to the news or watching the news, is that wise? I mean, obviously we have to do some things for our mental health and take breaks from these things, but at what point does it become a problem that you're uninformed? Hmm.
Mm, well,
Hmm.
I think we are actually addicted to our cell phones. And I think this has become a problem. Cell phones, watches, these electronics, I'll just put it overall electronics, where you, the happiness cannot be prevalent if the sadness is always in front of you. You're always getting hit with sadness, hit sadness. So it's super hard to be positive, to be happy and fulfilled if all you're looking at is the sad things. What happened today? What bad things? Oh, they're fighting over here. They're not that they're not doing it. Don't ignore it, but limit it. Limit it to the 6 o'clock news or 7 o'clock, whatever time that you watch the news. You don't need to hear it all day. And
Yeah.
schedule yourself that self care we talked about. And
You're right. I think about my mother-in-law. She doesn't have a cell phone anymore, but when she obsesses over certain things, like certain pieces of mail or something she saw on the news, and she'll start calling everybody. She'll start calling my husband, and and it's I think, like, how can you replace something like that with like a healthier activity? So you're not obsessing over the bad stuff. Like, it's so easy to do that. And I totally agree with you on the cell phones. We have a fear of missing out big time, but it's so easy to get stuck into a trap of the negativity that's constantly around, because that seems to be what people are drawn to and want to, like, talk about. It gets around a lot faster than the good stuff. So that's a big issue, and I don't know what to say. It's so hard. I can't even watch a movie sometimes. Like, I'm worried, like I'm gonna miss something for work, or something is going on. I need to check my phone. And usually 9 times out of 10, actually probably almost 10 out of 10, it wasn't anything I needed, that to look at or see. I just, there was that fear of missing out.
Yeah, there is. It is there because what if you missed out on some really good stuff, right?
So.
But that good stuff will be there. Now, I do agree on, checking your emails and stuff because someone might be emailing you information that
Right.
you may need. But generally speaking, yeah, you're right about that. It's really hard, and honestly, you have to do it in increments. I'll tell you what. I used to not wear a watch,
Hmm.
and I wore a watch all the time. But I decided I actually had to go 21 days without wearing a watch before I didn't do this. Now I only wear a watch because why is it? It's attached to my cell phone.
Yep. I hear you. I know. I turn off all the notifications on my watch because I don't want that to be distracting me. You feel it, making a noise, or
Mhm.
it vibrates. It's so distracting. I turn off all of that. So, all right, well, let's talk about what we're seeing. So, similar to what you were talking about earlier, there's a gal on TikTok. She is actually a success and mindset coach. So that's just for perspective. And she explains how she stays positive in a negative world. And she replied, one of the things she said was, you get what you look for. Meaning, if you only focus on the bad and negative, that is all you're going to see. Your brain is just going to scan and find those things. She likens it to buying a car. And then suddenly you see that car and it's all over the road. Similar to what you talked about with the dress. If that's your focus, that's what you're going to get.
And I totally agree with that because it's awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You were unaware before, even though there's a ton of cars on the road, but that one didn't interest you before. That color didn't interest you before, all of those things. Now that you're peaked, it's what I said about everything's around you. It's really in front of your face. You're just not aware of it. That's the only reason you don't see it. You have a
Yeah.
child, suddenly you notice all the new moms. How are they acting? You know, you didn't notice that before because you didn't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
So those sorts of things, they really make a difference in your awareness. You have to be, and some people call it mindfulness. Some people call it mindfulness as well. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
looking up any of this, those are the terms that you want to look up.
Yeah. Yeah. This makes sense. I agree. And I think, there was a Reddit thread that we found, and it had thousands of comments on it, but it was basically on how to stay positive in a negative world. And one person put a really long response in, and they talked about zooming out and zooming in, and said that when you try to stay positive, you have to zoom in on yourself, okay, and your own life before you zoom out and worry about the rest of the world. Very interesting. I mean, come on, we had this growing up, you know, like worry about yourself, when you're fighting with your sibling, worry about what you're doing, not what they're doing.
Yep.
Similar concept. What do you think?
No, that's true. And I remember my mom saying that. Worry about you. Don't worry about what they're doing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that. Yeah. So, no, I believe that concept. Now, zooming in, I would tweak that statement a little bit um, in the respect where when you zoom in, I don't want you to be oblivious to what's around you. I want you to focus on you, but I still want you to be aware of what's going on around you, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely does. I think, I mean, everything you said here talks about awareness, really. And if you're not aware, like that's the first thing you really need to do is like kind of check in with yourself. What's going on? What are the actions that need to happen here? But I don't know that we check in with ourselves enough.
Sometimes I feel like we're actually in denial.
Hmm.
Um,
agree with
things
that.
do get better, you know, but we have to be actively participating in to make that happen. If you do nothing about your situation, like if you don't try, the situation is going to remain the same, or you will, I call it float through life. Like
Mm-hmm.
float through life means you really didn't make the phone call or do the education, or whatever just happens to come along is
Yeah.
really where
Yes.
you went. You didn't make an active reasoning, an active push, an active try to make your
Mm-hmm.
life go in the direction that you wanted it to.
Firmly believe that inaction is action. If you do nothing, it doesn't fix the problem. So I'm with you. All right, last one we're seeing. So a trend on TikTok right now is using a specific sound for good luck. Okay, so it's a manifestation. So everyone knows that luck like isn't actually linked to a TikTok sound, right? But by using it, they have hopes. That you put out whatever's going to happen in the universe and whatever just by doing this. So um, there are a few different types of this, but the leads to the broader, question. What fixes itself, and if we want to, is this what we resort to when things are beyond our control, and we feel like we have to rely on good luck or manifestation. I often think about superstition, like eating pork and sauerkraut for New Year, or dressing a groom in a certain way for specific outcomes. But like my husband comes to mind with sports, you know, and he was beating himself up that he thought Penn State lost Saturday because he had changed up one of the things that he was wearing.
Oh,
Um, or just those regular superstitions like umbrella in the house, or path of a black cat, changing the calendar early. So like, what do you think? But about this whole like luck, chance, manifestation, superstition.
I call it coincidence, is what I call it. Um, I mean, think about it. If I knew that if I broke a mirror, I would have 7 years bad luck. I mean, and I wanted someone to have 7 years bad luck, I would place the mirror just right to make sure they broke it. I mean, I just, there was, toss salt on, I would break lines. I would, so many, if that actually worked, oh my word. So sometimes it does seem to, and I think it's a matter of coincidence and a combination of what you're looking for. Remember we talked
Mm,
about awareness? So that same outcome could have happened, 2 weeks ago, but you were not thinking about that. So you weren't even looking for it. So, but today, this is going to happen because I'm wearing such and such. So now I'm looking for it to happen.
mm-hmm.
So if it does happen, it wasn't that necessarily that was the case, but it's because now I'm looking. I'm like,
I agree. I agree with you because what if you don't even know any of these superstitions and you open the umbrella in the house and then I don't know, a week later you get hit by a car, but you didn't even know about it. So like, did it cause it, or sometimes you're just on that wavelength then and you're all paranoid about it and thus bringing it about. So I'm with you. I
well,
want to challenge the audience here. I want them to share the craziest superstition, that they've ever heard, or what they swear by. So, if we're gonna cut this clip, I would love to hear that and have people leave a comment. Just because I'm fascinated by that kind of stuff, and there are times too that I don't change calendar early. No, bad luck. So I'm just curious.
right. I would love to know what superstition it was and when did it work.
Mm. All right, another challenge. Hook it up, audience. All right, all right. Well, we're coming to the end of the podcast. Vixen, is there anything else you'd like to add about this topic?
That was it. That was it for me today, y'all.
All right. I think the only thing I'm going to say is, what peptides, what peptides we're communicating, and how are you feeling about that? You could change it tomorrow. You could change it tonight. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Light Her Project podcast. You can follow the conversation online with our hashtag. In the meantime, keep it real. Real women.
With real talk.